Here we are. Hi Stacey, hi Athina.
Hi, Paolo.
The faces that you see, in addition to mine, are Athina Karatzogianni and Stacey Featherstone. Good pronunciation? Did I do well so far? So welcome also to the people that are participating here on Zoom, but we are also live on Twitter, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, of course, and so we will discuss about digital citizenship and people empowerment. Is how this relate to some activism or democracy is, and so I will introduce immediately Athina Karatzogianni. You are a professor of media and communication at the University of Leicester in UK, and we will discuss about a piece of research that you have coordinated on behalf of the European Commission in an Horizon project, DG Generation, about the impact of technologies. And you have a lot of experience on the fields in between the intersection between digital media theory and global politics, which is something that we are very much looking forward. Stacey Featherstone, you are in the public policy manager for stakeholder engagement within Meta EU Affairs team in Brussels. You are focusing, so you are very well placed for what we are going to talk about. That is digital citizenship. So what is Meta doing in that regard? Is for those that don't know it, is Meta encompass now the Facebook platform, and so is within digital citizenship. There are a number of areas. In fact, we could start in a moment from what do you mean at Meta for digital citizenship. But first of all, just to hear your voice, welcome. Are you well?
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us.
Is our pleasure. In fact, we are coming towards the end of these EAVI conversations, and I think we have been good in having a gender balance as women and men, is young and not so young people. So we did quite well, and we were coming from all sort of parts in the world. I think we count 4 different continents and the number of countries as far as the guests is concerned. Participants was even more so. So I will stop with because it's one of the things that they tell me is I should not talk too long. Stacey, what do you mean? What are we going to talk about? What do you mean by digital citizenship? What are you doing at Meta?
Yeah, thanks, Paolo. So as Paolo said, my name is Stacey Featherstone. I work on our EU Affairs team here in Brussels for Meta, which now unites all of the different applications that were formerly under the name of Facebook. So WhatsApp, Instagram, the Facebook app itself, Messenger, Oculus. And part of our work at Meta, of course, is to foster a community online that is safe, in a place where people can participate in a way that is meaningful to them, whether it is mobilizing around causes that matter to them, running their business, communicating with friends, accessing information. We know that there are people who use our platforms as a primary source of news, both personal and public, of course. And those worlds, the online and the offline worlds, just become more and more blurred, right? They're more connected than ever before, especially the pandemic really demonstrated this, right? Our worlds suddenly, from one day to the next, were completely online. And of course, this is positive, right? Technology and digital progress, these are providing new ways for us to relate and communicate, but they are not without challenges. And I'm sure we can dig into what those challenges are and what the response is to each of those. But for us, if we want people to be able to reap the benefits of their online communities while being resilient to the harms that they may find there, they need to be equipped as digital citizens, which is a broad, holistic skill set that may have at a time meant, can I turn on my computer? Do I know how to delete an email? But it's gone way beyond digital skills and moved into a space where we're talking about mental health and well-being online. We're talking about
you have Stacey touch upon already many areas that, as you said, that we would like to go a bit deeper in a moment. Is indeed is one of the core of our discussion is about the skills that people do need in order to participate to public life. And Athina, you have made is your scope of research is exactly on these domains, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, perhaps and to complement what Stacey is saying, perhaps a definition or how kind of it has been defined in the scholarship might be helpful here. So broadly, it is not just, about digital skills. It is about how people are online, how they behave online, their actions online, and it's not about the status of belonging to a nation state and the rights and responsibilities that come with that. It's more about the digital environment. How do they claim perhaps human and civil rights or make rights claims in the digital environment? But this construction of digital citizenship, it is widely celebrated, has been celebrated. Especially until up to 2015, 2016 in particular, there was this techno-utopianism about how it has a democratizing effect, a liberation technology. There are also social media and political change, especially with the Arab Spring, etc. And then citizen journalism, or how fan culture appropriates more cultural, classical, traditional cultural production. But then again, you had this surveillance scholars analyzing citizens watching the authorities, exposing wrongdoing.
So if I understand it, there are two aspects. One is indeed a kind of individual skills, and this now is so that you can engage in public life. You are empowered somehow, and one of the critics these days.
You enhance your participation in society. Basically, it might generate innovation, social change, the public good, etc. However, since 2016 or so, the scholarship and the public discourse, particularly because the scholarship already had alerted us to the problems, but we have the fact that many of our activities are online and that they generate data, geolocation data, when we walk through our mobile phones, metadata of online communication, data of our likes and dislikes, data on our movements, activities in smart cities, sensors. So this data is collected and stored and monitored and shared, and they are sold by social media services, online platforms, data brokers, intelligence agency, public administrators, etc. So this kind of problem, like this problematic about what happens when we engage as citizens is something that has been discussed more and more, both in the public discourse, but also in the scholarship to a great extent. So you have like this techno-utopianism that turns especially after 2016 with the US elections and the Brexits and the things, right? So
going back to Stacey, because I think that is while we were trying to explain is maybe we were a bit confusing to the audience. So we touch truly is on many subjects, but is one of these is indeed within digital citizenship there is a civic engagement so that people can participate to public life and democracy, and in this sense is how does Meta see your role, your responsibility in this, in contributing to a healthy democracy? It's in rhetorical terms.
Yeah, I think, our job here is to build safe and healthy and supportive digital communities. That's no easy job, of course, right? And Athina is referring to some of the questioning and reckoning that has happened around technology when we refer to its impact on democracy, right? And what needs to happen to then protect democracy and also allow it to live and breathe, right? Democracy is about all of the voices that are on the platform. So for us, at the end of the day, to build this community, this positive, thriving community, we have to mount some sort of response to answer to the harms that Athina is referring to. So we have a technological response, which relies on product features and tools and how to structure the actual platform. And we have a programmatic response too, which are our partnerships and our campaigns, whether these are house ads or ads from advocacy groups, bots that we build on WhatsApp and Messenger in cooperation with government to work on getting out the word, for example, that an election is coming, providing people with the information they need to register to vote.
Because you have not always done well. Let's admit it.
No, I think, there's no one size fits all approach to elections, right? There's as many jurisdictions as there are people on the Meta platforms, practically, not quite, of course. But we've seen since 2016 over 200 elections and have really mounted a much more comprehensive response. We are a very different company than we were then, and I'm not just talking about the name change. When we're talking about elections, we have the two sides of the same coin. On the one hand, you have the election integrity and actually protecting the safe space. On the other hand, you have encouraging people to participate in civic discourse and be part of their electoral process and participate in democracy. So we work on both sides of that issue.
We will go. I will ask you a little bit later, maybe what's your view on this proposal of the Commission on regulating political advertising. We go back to Athina, because there is a part of your research that that I've reread this morning is being good and preparing doesn't mean that I have learned much, but I've done my best. And there is a part of your research that you have done in different countries, which was focusing on finding out how people were using, for instance, social media to be active on, issues like climate change. Is it, which were your findings? Which is and in this respect, we have also asked, we will ask a short poll to ask the same question to our participants, but you can anticipate what did you find out?
Well, yes. First of all, thank you for reading. And that it's part of being in this constant online spaces, that the time for reading. And thank you for taking the time.
And it's a pity that there are a lot of scientific papers that are very high quality content that no one reads, isn't it?
Yeah, there are also some paywalls, but I mean, there is this effort about open access. Let's see what happens with that. So what we did for DigiGen, basically we work with 3 teams, one at the University of Leicester, and one at Pantheon University, Dimitris Pasanoglou in Greece, in Athens, and one team at the University of Tallinn in Estonia. And in the particular study, we asked why and how people are using digital technologies, ICT, for civic participation. Now, eventually, I mean, the case studies we looked at for Greece was anti-policing demonstrations and anti-gender violence demonstrations, because of particular incidents. And we did this fieldwork during the pandemic through online interviews and ethnography, online content analysis, and online interviews. In Estonia, it was the case studies were LGBTQ+, and also there was an emphasis on Black Lives Matter, because and that was very interesting, because the population is not such that would have ordinarily warranted, but the very young people really felt that they wanted to participate. So you see this trend of the protest of the murder of George Floyd, like finding youth in Estonia, where it has like an ethnic Russian population, but you never see them protesting about that. So that's a very interesting one. In the UK, which is more that what I can talk about very quickly, we looked at the Extinction Rebellion youth, and we also looked at Black Lives Matter as well. So about the climate change, to come to what you asked me, sorry about the intro, what we found out, first of all, was that in the UK, you had Extinction Rebellion had communication innovation to a certain extent. It did not rely so much on the usual digital everyday media like Facebook and Twitter and so on. They developed, they used other platforms, and also they were very mindful of surveillance. For instance, they left WhatsApp at some point for Telegram Signal, like other protest movements did. Also, they use for storage. In Switzerland, a specific one that adhered to the ideology that was carbon neutral. They used Glassfrog, they used Mattermost, other platforms as well. But what was found very interesting, besides the affordances, there was organizational innovation as well. They used this holacracy model, like decision-making by consent, like newer kind of organization to mitigate the problem between hierarchical and horizontal organizations and the problems that Occupy Wall Street had, the model of Occupy, as they call it. But what is interesting is that due to the pandemic, because most activities also for these movements moved online, so there was also intense restructuring, taking advantage of the pandemic period. So while they were moved online, they also restructured. And also what we saw was intergenerational mentoring was like really very important. For instance, we noticed that with Black Lives Matter, where you had pre-existing anti-racist organizations helping younger activists to take permission from the authorities for COVID safety protest and so on. So these are some of what we found out.
So it also fits with what Stacey was saying before, is in different countries there is a different approach and this depending obviously of the different culture, social background, and therefore, but all of them is it seems they value the fact that they have to be online as well as offline. They do use social media in different ways. Is either to get organized or to make noise, to provide more information.
Also, there's more distrust. I mean, in Greece, there's far more distrust, both in the political culture about the government and the tech operations of social media. In Estonia, not so much. So there are certain things going on that are influenced by the actual conditions that are in the country, the political culture, the socioeconomic context, and so on. Yeah.
So it is different, but still is judging from the result of the poll here is 2/3 of the people that say that they were not actually very active on any social movement recently. In our EAVI conversation, we had 4 or 5 digital activists, very young, energetic, dynamic, really passionate about. So maybe I was a bit in a bubble myself, and I thought that many more people would have been active, but not necessarily. It's not obvious, isn't it? Does Meta in this respect, Stacey, when you were saying before to offering this space to debate, to collaborate, is it again something that what do you see happening on your platforms in this respect?
Yeah, I mean, I would venture to guess that even if people aren't necessarily actively participating in movements, they're potentially following them and keeping tabs on the sort of discourse about these movements, both online and off. And for us, as kind of a big mirror to society, of course, anything that people are talking about offline, they're also talking about online. So we do see this conversation about climate and climate change unfolding on our platforms. And one of our big lessons that we took from COVID was actually the power of a platform like Facebook or Instagram to really connect people to reliable and accurate information and expert advice during a global crisis, which I think we can all argue climate change fits the bill.
Yesterday I was reading that we have in 100 years' time, human beings could not exist anymore.
Yeah, pretty scary stuff, right? And so we've taken sort of the lessons that we learned during the pandemic and applied them to climate change as a global crisis of similar scale, if not worse. And because we are a global tech company connecting more than 3 billion people, we feel that we really can have a real impact here, right? In making sure that the debate happens. First and foremost, everyone has to have a voice, but that it happens with civility, that it happens with information that is accurate, that it happens in a way that we can, we're talking about a country to country approach, right? Maybe there are countries where the information that's needed is very basic of what is climate change, what is happening here. And then in countries where you have high emitters, you need to be focused a little bit more on greener ways of life or solutions to the problem, or in countries where the problem is front and center and it's in their government and it's in their politics all the time, and you have people start to tune out and sort of fade away because it's depressing, right? You need to focus and more on the solutions and be a little bit more positive oriented, right? So I think
do you feel that you should intervene in the debate or not, or to which extent?
So the answer to that question is that we do intervene in that debate. It is not in an effort to snuff out voices. As I said, everyone has a voice and that debate must be provided the space to happen. But we do have a role in influencing that debate, right? So we have established our climate science center, an information center where people can come and access accurate information. We had during COP, we had a chat bot running. We have cooperation with the UNFCCC. We are participating also ourselves in that conversation as well. And I think that we wouldn't want to underestimate nor overestimate our voice, but I think that there's a voice there as well. So we do intervene. We do take action on climate misinformation, for example. We demote. That means that this content would be much lower in your news feed. We demote content that is spammy or clickbaity or has been proven to be untrue by our fact-checking community, we put labels. There are even, for repeat offenders, we can take action against people who are consistently posting this type of content, to whether it's going as far as removing them from the platforms or suspending accounts. So we do intervene, but not in a place where we are eliminating voices, but where we are making sure that we're providing space for the voices that have their basis in science.
I asked the same question to Athina. I also remind the participants in whichever social media they are, that they can ask questions that Stacey and Athina will answer toward the end of our conversation. Is Athina, how do you say? Obviously, is Stacey is working. I mean, she said what Meta is doing, which is very convincing. You are an academician and researcher, so more is a third party. What is which are your reflection about this big debate that is the balance in between freedom of expression and disinformation and all the things that you, Stacey, were mentioning, hate speech, to which extent that should be moderated? What's your view?
I think that there has been considerable criticism for all platforms, Facebook in particular, in regards to moderation, and some of them have to do with the practices, the labor behind moderation as well. But what I would say is that over-reliance on AI and more automated ways has been also a problem. An example from my own research was when you have trolling and counter-reporting, reporting fake accounts that are not fake to get them out, like this kind of like more micro-aggression kind of stuff, and more nuanced way of looking at things cannot be done by AI. And I think there is more recent efforts to actually look at the AI problem, that it might only like as 3% or whatever. There's this problem of we're relying on automation on this, but also how the overall approach, like if it's in a developing nation, how far up is in the interest of the company? They're not a very big nation or important nation. And there's been also a lot of whistleblowing material and leaks there, which I think that Meta has made an effort to address in some cases, but you see that there is that criticism, I think is healthy. I think it is something that should happen in the public domain. I think at the heart of the problem is how this history of digital development of the platforms has happened, because it has been a wild west in a way, right? It's a very privatized space. It's an enterprise association space. So we do civil association in an enterprise association space, which is a clear paradox. So expecting that the government should regulate the platforms and do all the work, or the corporates should actually do that, or them funding civil society organizations to do that kind of job of watchdog, of holding them accountable, etc. I think there's more synergies and collaborations between different actors without excluding civil society actors that are not organized in a very effective way, for instance, more coordinating, open coordination kind of mechanisms to include disadvantaged groups, marginalized groups, etc., and from the global south, because the European Commission, as you know, the action plan, European Democracy Action Plan, but there you see, what is being engaged in that plan, and maybe we can discuss it, because it's a very interesting story, especially because the European Commission is one of the few actors on the planet that has a GDPR, for example, and all those kinds of mechanisms. And it's not perfect, but at least it is something, or they have an idea about fair elections or disinformation, what to do about the free media, like how to engage civil society. There are some ideas there. So it's not left just to the corporates or individual countries. So as an actor has this kind of like level of, let's say, jump scaling in the global arena, kind of have some proposals. They're not perfect about what can be done about these things without saying, oh, bad Facebook or Meta or Twitter or whatever. Yeah.
Is Europe, is in that in this respect, it seems is to commit or to try or to put efforts on managing in the best possible way this very complex is for a number of reasons issues, and as you said, we can. Stacey, what do you think about is a link to the Digital Democracy Action Plan? There is this proposal by which that needs to be approved by the European Parliament and the Council now, but is following which is political advertising will be banned. If and there are a number of rules, there cannot be micro-targeting on a specific group of people. If an advertising is can be allowed, if it is labeled how much money are spent, who from, so that the people is not. Remember, there was a product placement at one point in the movies where there was a hidden advertising, and instead people have the right to know if they are target or no, or promoted a certain product, in this case a political party. Which are your reactions on this, Stacey?
Yeah, I would just like to chime in really briefly, if you allow me, on what Athina was saying about this being kind of a whole of society responsibility here, and that everyone has a role to play. I just couldn't agree more with that statement. I think that it's a lot of credit to European policymakers and the policymaking machine that they have started to really take these things seriously and want to lend a hand to making sure that it's not just private companies making these kinds of decisions on extremely complex issues, right? So I just wanted to chime in there. On EDAP, so on the European Democracy Action Plan, which we very much support, it was that whole initiative was the first place where we really articulated towards the European Commission and the institutions our position on digital citizenship, and that being a tool to one of many, of course, to shore up democracy. The proposal that came out last week or the week before, the 25th of November, couple weeks, yeah. We welcome this proposal. I mean, we've been calling for regulation on political ads for a long time. And I think that we need regulation to have consistency across the industry, and that's needed so that, as you were saying, Paulo, users understand what's in front of them on the screen, right? Who's it coming from? Why is it coming to me? In particular, I thought the definition that the Commission takes is quite sensible. You know, it's a broader definition. You don't necessarily have to be a politician to be running politically oriented advertisements on social media, right? So it takes the social and political issue ads definition, which goes beyond election-related material, but really focuses more on meaningful transparency, with labels, with repositories of ads that have run in the past, just to ensure that the requirements are really imposed on this larger category of ads. I mean, in terms of targeting, don't allow, just to finish, because you mentioned targeting, we already don't allow targeting across protected classes, so race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion. And we would agree that using, rather than limiting targeting, increasing transparency and user controls of why am I seeing something is a first port of call.
Which is, in a way, it could be a relief, if there are more rules for organization like yours, is so that is clear, is what you are allowed to do, what you are not, and life will be easier in a certain way, rather than having to burden the burden of the responsibility on your shoulder. I mean,
it's more than just the burden. It's about making sure, I mean, we're in an open internet setting here too, and it's making sure that those rules apply everywhere. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where, you know, maybe we reach a point where we've managed by some miracle, you know, we will always be working on this topic and we will always need to evolve in our response. But if by some miracle we were able to purge all platforms of all harmful content, that content is going to go elsewhere unless we have that kind of standard across the whole internet, right? So for me, it's more than just the burden of having to work on it. This is something that, as Athina was saying, this is all of society. Just having regulation doesn't mean we're done and we just have to fulfill the standards of the regulation. We're going to want to go above and beyond that, right? But it is about making sure that this sort of harmful content, vitriol, manipulation, isn't just going somewhere else.
Thank you, Stacey. Maybe we can discuss a little bit more also with you, Athina, about the role and responsibility of social media. We have a poll actually, is that we can also put out to ask and have some interaction with this. Again, it refers very much to what we were saying before. So is it a condition and necessity is nowadays to use social media, because otherwise, or not really, and in which respect is Athina? I think is Athina.
Well, it's Athina in Greek, but when I came here 25 years ago, they couldn't say that very well, so Athina became easier. So it's like, it's like that.
So when you say here, you mean in UK, obviously. And you didn't ask her to change your first name into London Karatzogianni.
Well, I would have to change it. Very cities in the UK if I'd done that, because I've moved around. But anyway, I wanted to just to mention that there is let's say a regulation industry booming, also in AI ethical guidelines. But I think for me the interesting one is the Digital Services Act and what this can do as well. So we'll see what happens there. About social movements and the question you asked me, I think that in contexts where, in countries where there's less digital development, what you see is a more emphasis on the street, right? That the politics of the street, I have to go to the street to demand, and then we're going to accomplish something. Where more advanced digital development, you see more reliance on various forms of platforms. I mean, youth in Estonia, we're using TikTok, all sorts of things. If you recall, Russia, Belarus, TikTok, as well. In previous mobilizations, I mean, in Brazil, during the elections, WhatsApp was used into sinister effect as well, or India, for example. Now, there was, for like the first 10 years of this story, the notice, for example, from 2000, maybe 2010, there was more this feeling that ideologically we don't like these big platforms, so we're not going to use them because ideologically they're capitalist or whatever else. But you see then even in organizations that are more radical, both on the left and the right, what you see is they're going, well, this is where the square is now. The square is a digital square, and it's on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, it's on these platforms. So you have like this, especially from 2013, 14, this mainstreaming, so to speak, of digital activism that becomes like part of protesting and organizing protests, especially because, of course, of the Arab Spring, etc. But I think what for me is really, really interesting is that with the pandemic, what you saw was that it's not just an element or a tool or a complementary element in the structure of things, of protest organizations, social movements, etc. Now it is like at the core, because of the pandemic. You have like 2 years of this kind of thing where people had to necessarily meet, also in political parties. They would have like their council meetings or Labour Party meetings in the UK on Zoom. So you see, like, this is by default now becomes core in the structure of movement mobilization. So and with that comes more understanding, of course, about the pitfalls, about the Zoom bombing, about the surveillance, about the fact that if you have open source intelligence out there, governments, intelligence agency, everybody can have access to what is going on, and that creates also laziness about how we understand what's going on. It's like, oh yeah, I can see it, it's there, oh, I know this, but you don't rely on the everyday lived experience in actual life as well, right? In midlife, as we're saying in the study. So that has been also very interesting, the laziness factor of how do you actually build organizations, because if you have the reliance on the virtual, you don't build political organizations, right? Just go in for an event and then that finish is like flash mob, or you go to the anti-trap women protest with the pink hats, and what came of that? Or right, so you don't have sustained political action, right? Sustained participation, long-term planning of an organization. So that is a big pitfall, and it's a tactical freeze as well for many of these movements.
Is the apathy of citizens is one of the elements that certainly influence the low turnout at elections in whichever country, which is a big danger for democracy, because if there is no participation, obviously, there's no democracy. But in this respect, indeed, we are in a process, in a phase in which the platforms they are repositioning themselves. We are all learning. And obviously. We hopefully we are all trying to do our best within our own nature. Now I read first is the result of the poll, and then I have a couple of questions here. I see on the chat for one for sure for Stacey. I see the name. So do you think social media, when it comes to social media, yes, to raise awareness and to mobilize people, in fact. And I think that is in line a bit with your research, Athina. So is social media are used indeed, either or both, to raise awareness about what the social movement is doing, the activists, but as well as to organize them. Is it correct? That's what you find out. So it is social media should be used. There is indeed a certain apathy. Is somebody in a comment here is saying that social media are much more often used for leisure and entertainment and futile things. But why not? I mean, everyone should be free to use it in the way that he prefers.
It depends where you are in the world, really, because just to give like 3 or 4 examples, so if you might say it's activism if you share articles, let's say, about the cause that is just sitting there and sharing articles without even reading them, which is a more gestural way of saying to your peers or your social network, this is what I believe in. Sometimes we share without even looking at what we're sharing. That's the misinformation, as in sharing disinformation. You don't realize that it is disinformation, that's misinformation. But there are contexts where this is a very dangerous thing that can land you in prison. So if you are gay, homosexual, LGBTQ in a country that this is illegal, right, then you're sharing that, then you are in danger. Or so if you are a dissident in China, you can complain about the local hospital, but if you try to organize and coordinate and publicize actual protest, right, you will be arrested, and people have spent 15 years in prisons for doing this kind of thing, using social media. And of course, it's a completely different environment because it's a very vertical thing that is controlled by the Communist Party, the internet. Not they're open economically, but not political. So there's hyper capitalism and all that kind of stuff. So it depends where you are. Let's say, even in the global north, even if you look at 2011 with riots in the UK, you had the government arresting a 16-year-old for inciting hatred on Facebook, right, during those riots. already, like that was 10 years ago. So it does depend the geopolitically in where you are in the position in the world system, your country is, your citizenship status as well. So and your socioeconomic background, cultural background. There's a lot there that it really is not just about what a platform is doing, basically. That it's what you bring with you to that platform as well, right? So
yeah, it adds to the challenge of such a global company that is, you mentioned 3 billion is users, and obviously they spread across many countries which are perceived and behaving differently to their respective citizens. Obviously, there is somebody from LinkedIn here is asking, in fact, in this respect, if also well, are the initiatives, campaigns Meta develops in the field of digital citizenship different from EU and US? Is there a different perception about this topic in the States? No, we were mentioning about regulations. Is it different to what you do here and there?
I think so. Our approach on any topic anywhere is different. That being said, we're obviously trying to develop community standards that are sort of our global that are global, and obviously legal codes in whatever country we might be operating in take precedence. So things that Athina was saying remain valid. That being said, we try to define with experts community standards that can be as applicable globally as possible, and those are in some ways our laws, right? This is what it means to want to participate as a digital citizen within this community. You need to adhere to those laws. So that part of it is we try to be standardized and try to be as global as possible. In terms of our on-site approach within the EU versus the US on digital citizenship, I think that our approach is inherently different because we're dealing with 27 different member states. We're dealing with 27 different cultures. We need to be able to approach in a way that is localized. So our job here within the EU Affairs team is to come up working closely with umbrella type organizations like our EU Affairs team is within Meta to find the appropriate channels and avenues for responses within member states. So one example that we are currently working on now is a misinformation awareness raising pilot and misinformation is a big piece of digital citizenship. Being able to participate in the environment means being able to process and digest the content that you're seeing, right? Is a WhatsApp chat bot that would send information to citizens in country. But to do that, we need to localize and work with a local third-party fact checker who understands the context. So yes and no, I guess is the answer, is that we try to operate obviously at a global level. We're a global company. We try to have these laws, these community standards that we also enforce. And then at each local level, of course, we have declinations of those policies and that programming. I hope that helps to.
Thank you. Well, it's quite exhaustive. Part of it is obviously is a common sense in the sense that is clear that you try to adapt to the different.
Can I come into that, because I found this very interesting, the global and the local and the glocal. I think that it took a long time to understand that what happens online has material consequences. And talking about WhatsApp, for example, in India, you had lynchings because of misinformation videos, right? And lynchings where there was a viral video, and then people thought, they're going to come and take our children, and they lynched the travelers or salespeople passing through towns. And that was 2018, I believe. So I think that the understanding of the cleansing in Myanmar, all this kind of, it has material consequences, and it took a very long time to actually understand that and understand how to respond to it as well. That it's not enough to just, rely on some bot, or that you have to make these local connections as we're talking about now. And for me, it is very interesting because in the scholarship, you have these issues raised like already from 2012, 2013, like these kind of issues, that it is this illusion that we are online, and this doesn't like have like actual effect, bloody effect in the real world. And that has been a problem. And I think this happens because, one of the reasons this happens is that you have a lot of funding like falling into organizations that oftentimes create a great digital bureaucracy, right? But you have the problem of how they connect with other actors, civil society actors, or different kind of with different demands or more diverse demands for rights, etc., etc. So it's not enough to have a great organizational bureaucracy. It's like how you connect with more horizontal participatory forms of organization and localized groups, etc., etc. Yeah.
Yeah, is obviously I let you comment, Stacey. Is it is these days we are coming at least to identify which are the problematic aspects. Is to contribute to the solution. Obviously, will take time, but indeed, if I can interpret, is your reflection is why. To Stacey, why does it take? Did it take so long for Meta to do what you are doing now? Or in a more direct way, why should we trust you now? In about which seems very good intentions and plans.
Yeah, I think in any case, our response, why you ask why it took so long, I think our response has always been there, but of course it has to evolve, right? We can't get complacent. We can't claim at any point that our work is done here. As much as we see, our communities online being creative to use our tools for good, we also see malicious actors being creative to use the tools and abuse the tools, right? In terms of a question of trust, I don't really think, for me, it's not a question of trust per se. It's more of a question of evidence that what we're doing is either working or it's not. And are we able, with our technological and campaign response, to support a certain behavior or digital citizenship on the platforms or not? And so I hope that on the one hand, there is trust in the solutions that we are putting forward today, tomorrow, because they aren't created in a vacuum, right? These are created with local partners, with global experts, social justice experts, disinfo experts, fact checkers, lawyers, free speech defenders, you name it, right? So I hope that there's trust in that sense in the solutions, that this isn't something that we've just come up with on our own. The next one I would say is trust indeed in the evidence that what has happened is working, whether it's the investments in safety, whether it's the in pioneering, and indeed, Athina makes good points that AI needs to learn and evolve as well, but we have pioneered AI technology to try to remove harmful content. And then the enforcement reports on the community standards show very much in black and white that we have seen a reduction, a meaningful reduction, right? We've halved nearly the amount of hate speech on Facebook since we started keeping track of those numbers. So the caution just to finish, because I think it's an important point about trust, right, is we can celebrate all of those successes, that we've seen the behavioral changes, that we had a reduction in harmful content. But I'll make the point again, that could mean, though, that while we've been successful, there are other corners of the internet that can get much more bleak. And so that's where things like the DSA, like the EDAP come in, because we need to establish standards that all companies can meet in this space. So, we've been vocally supportive of this for quite some time. And I think that the work that's happening now in the EU is we stand firmly behind and with the regulator there. But I think only when we have regulation in this space is your question about trust definitively answered, because then it's not about trusting us or trusting them. It's about trusting the fact that we've all come together and had our political system come up with something that can stand the test of time.
Thank you, Stacey. I have a couple of questions here that will need to be answered quickly because we are coming to the end of our hour already. One is just a comment, Athina, about from Twitter. How do you think that the COVID disinformation has affected citizens and their participation?
Okay, so that's a fantastic question.
To do it in
like 30 seconds then. Okay, so I think that there has been, it's like almost like a sinister marriage that has brought together often far-right, libertarian, cultist, religious groups, you name it, with those that have like have faced problems to trust the state with health issues. Certain communities, for example, is like a weird, sinister marriage that produces this bastardization child that we see of like very bizarre coming together, right, of certain groups that possibly previously were not together as well. So there's an interesting thing coming there. So the anti-vaxxers and the far right and the cults and the religions and all those kind of like they come together. It's a very strange thing that happens there. I think the issue with COVID also was that some other groups that were more anti-authoritarian and the establishment from the left somehow joined forces with it. So we see actually like it's not that the more left kind of more social justice oriented has also not also often in certain countries like joined these anti-COVID measures demonstrations.
Thank you, Athina. Is sorry, I know that these are keywords. One would need to elaborate on this for much longer, but we are coming to the end. Just for you, Stacey, I reformulate a question that is there from Facebook. How can we assure our well-being and our participation with the introduction is so to be easier to answer is should we be worried about the metaverse in respect of our well-being? Yes or no?
Listen, I mean, the metaverse is not something that any single company is going to create. Hopefully it's something that we can bring, the vision that we have, the potential that we see in the metaverse and in immersive social connection is something that we can bring to life in collaboration with a range of stakeholders. What I would say is that we want to capture the great opportunity while making sure that we're thinking carefully about everything that we've learned from the past 15 years about harmful content, about safety, about privacy, about election integrity, about empathy, and use the power of the metaverse to foster, obviously, things like empathy, like resilience, like connection, while making sure that we're building in the protections that we think are necessary.
From my side, I have to say that you should be given credit because you are really active on many of those topics that you are mentioning. Is with new initiative and groups and export and exchanges and debates. So is certainly you are doing an effort which must be the result of some strategic decisions, but it could be a win-win. I mean, is a situation we hope so. We just like to conclude as usual our conversation with our guest with what are you looking forward, which is your dream, which is Athina Fest, is what would you like to see happening, is you have the magic wand. How do you pronounce it? Wand,
yeah.
In relation to my own research, or in relation to
in relation to much broader is a question. So is what you know you are on, I imagine, on a number of things. Is what are you excited about? What do you think you would like to see happening next year or in the next years?
One of the areas that we didn't touch up, I mean, we talked about climate change, but we didn't talk about is the impact of digitization on the environment, for example. And there's lots of research to be done there. There's like in the scholarship, the 3 years worth on the kind of very specific kind of this issue. And I think that's going to be very interesting, because however safe we are online, or however Meta or any other company, or we regulate the fact that we are facing this ecological disaster, I think it is also in real life very important. So I hope that there's going to be more work in that area, and I'm aware that there are sustainability efforts from various companies in that regard, but perhaps more research could be done in that area, and more also from regulators as well, to look at this particular issue a bit more.
Thank you. And Stacey, same question.
I mean, for me, just to chime in on some of the things that Athina was saying about apathy, I think making sure that the conversations like the one we're having today are reaching people that need them most, that we're not preaching to the choir, that we're able to get people engaged around civic causes online. I think that for me, one of the most exciting pillars of digital citizenship is indeed that living out of your civic duty and responsibility online. So for me, if we could find ways to reach those who really need to hear these kinds of conversations and help them foster the skill set of a digital citizenship to unlock those opportunities, I think then we could be proud of ourselves at the end of 2022. But let's see. Stay tuned.
Thank you, Stacey. That is partly also of our aim to with this EAVI conversation to offer this space for this kind of exchanges. Obviously, we don't have the same scale and impact of Meta. But that's the spirit to connect is good and beautiful minds and having in the end we all have the same problem when it comes to these existential threats like climate change. So I'm sure that we don't need enemies. We need allies. And together hopefully we will make it. I'm sure we will. Well, I'm not sure, but I am regardless of rationale, I'm quite optimistic. So thank you to you both. And to the participants that were on Twitter, on LinkedIn here, obviously live. We will also make these videos available offline with subtitles, so that people will be able to enjoy from their sofa. Next Thursday we'll have Miles Dyer, that is our last for this year guest. And we'll talk about something that you mentioned again is a very young, dynamic, energetic guy that was on tour with his band. He wrote me an email now. I hope that he will be back by Thursday at 6, and we are going to talk about the digital empathy gap. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Paolo. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.